Nier Reincarnation, it's finally here. It went live officially on July 29th, and now people are finally playing it. I've been looking forward to this game for a long time. So much, in fact, that I binged through the game front to back in 2 days, and I only lost a little bit of my sanity. Of course, I mean this in the best way possible. This is still a Nier game. It's canon to Automata and Replicant and Gestalt. Yoko Taro himself confirmed it. And the story of the game has just as many odd symbols and ideas that Automata's story had. For better or for worse. But of course, I have to point out that this is still a gacha game. It's still free to play, obviously. It has all of those mechanics. They didn't hide this during the marketing. However, this is probably the most generous free-to-play game I've ever played. And I mean that with full honesty. The game obviously has its own in-game currency since this is a gacha game, and that means it also has a premium currency that you can spend real-world money on, and you use the in-game currency, which is gems, to spend on the gacha banners to get real rare characters. But the quest to gem ratio in just the main story quests alone is shockingly generous and player-friendly. You can earn so many gems just by completing the story quests. In fact, I managed to beat this entire game in 2 days somehow without spending a single real-world dime, which is something Pokemon Unite could certainly learn from. Now, gameplay-wise, this is definitely a far cry from Automata or Replicant 1.22. Both of those games were hack-and-slash games that were mainly developed by Platinum Games. Reincarnation here, as far as I know, was developed fully in-house at Square Enix and has a very different gameplay style. It's a weird mix of those AFK clicker games you would find all over the place on the App Store and Google Play Store, a typical Square JRPG, and also throwing in some 3D exploratory elements here and there. The game also looks shockingly good for a mobile phone game, and I mean that. This game looks so pretty, and the environmental art is friggin' fantastic. And I mean that honestly, this game looks way better than I thought it would look. And while I will say that the battle system can be engaging, playing this game for long periods of time can start to grate on you, and at that point the game lost a little bit of its luster for me. I will say though that exploring the overworld and exploring the weapon memories, which I promise we'll get to later in more detail, exploring those feel much nicer but also a little more linear. I mean, they basically boil down to corridor or hallway simulators, but they're not nearly as bad as Final Fantasy XIII. That much I can assure you. I will say that aside from one instance way late in the game is criminally lacking in enemy variety. It's just these funny looking dark enemies you'll encounter for most of the game. But admittedly, it's pretty funny and satisfying seeing the team you worked so hard to build up just beat the ever-living crap out of these guys. The glue that kind of holds everything together for the gameplay are the weapon memories, which are these very sad and very tragic stories that our main character will jump into and experience for story critical purposes that I'm not going to spoil yet. The art style for these stories is really nice, and they mostly play out in a 2D perspective, with the exception of story important battles which play out like any other battle. In order to get to these weapon memories, you're going to be exploring the cage, which is the overworld for these dark scarecrows, which of course contain the memories and also special weapons you'll get that are based on the memories that you see within. The environments inside the cage are honestly all pretty nice and fairly varied, and of course they all look really nice. Everything ran really smooth at a consistent 30 FPS. It's not 60, but at least it ran smoothly. I will take all the wins I can get, especially when it comes to a mobile game. Now, unfortunately, the overworld is a little empty and barren. There's no NPCs to interact with aside from Mama. She's always with you. She's by your side throughout the entire game, so that kind of defeats the purpose. And it does feel like a hallway simulator. And on the plus side, you can actually move your characters around whenever you're in battle and you can dodge attacks. You don't have much more input than that though, aside from maybe charging up and using special attacks. There's really not much more to it than that, sadly. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean the game is bad, far from it. This is still a really fun game to play, especially when it comes to completing the story and just finding out the motives for all of the characters, especially the characters inside the weapon memories, for sure. Other thing I really need to mention is just the sheer quality of the voice acting and line delivery here. Like, it is honestly some of the best voice delivery I've ever heard in a mobile game. And that says a lot because there's never this much care put into a mobile game. At least none that I've seen recently. In fact, I've only ever seen Square put this much care and attention into a game like this for their console games and their PC games. Never for their mobile games. Not even for their mobile ports of any of the Final Fantasy games that are available on the iOS store or the Google Play Store. It's honestly kind of weird and a little surreal to see this much effort put into a game for this kind of platform. Another sadly not so great aspect I need to mention is that unfortunately enemy battles in the overworld are restricted to these strange black force fields that you just saw a few seconds ago, and battles are strictly locked to just 3 enemies per battle with a 3-man team. You can't have more, and you don't face more enemies than that. While the cage does feel empty, it is actually pretty fun to explore. There's plenty of environments to check out. You can backtrack fairly easily, but not too far. It's pretty fun. Some more really important mechanics I need to mention is the fact that you can enhance the strength of your weapons. And trust me, this is probably one of the most important mechanics in the game. You really got to take into account the strength of your weapons and their elemental attributes, because trust me, if you don't pay attention to that, you're going to have a bad time. There's a pretty big difficulty spike in the game about halfway through, so really pay attention to this. It seemed like some kind of superfluous element you would find in any gacha game, but trust me, it's not. Every enemy in the game, no matter how big or small, will have an elemental weakness, and you need to make sure your weapon has that elemental weakness. If it doesn't, or if it's the same element, your ass will be used to wipe the floor. And honestly, if you do pay attention to whatever kind of stats your weapons have, you'll be able to breeze right through most of the enemies, except for probably most of the endgame enemies. But even then, you shouldn't have too much trouble. And of course, on top of that, the special attacks and charged special attacks you have will be even more powerful and just wipe the floor with the enemies. Trust me, it is one of the most satisfying feelings ever. I also have to mention that these stories inside the weapon memories are very sad and very tragic. None of these stories have happy endings. Ever. Everyone in these stories either dies or loses everything they love and just yearns for murderous revenge. It's honestly kind of gut-wrenching and heartbreaking seeing these characters struggle so much and they just get nothing. They get absolutely nothing. None of these characters in these stories are in for a good time, and it's honestly a little hard to watch. Not gonna lie, it's a little hard to watch. Okay, now that we've finally gotten all of that out of the way, it's time to talk about the game's story. And this is very much a Nier story. I should also point out that this game hasn't been fully out for a week yet. People are still going through the game's story, so there's going to be massive spoilers everywhere. Seriously, even though this is a mobile game, this is still a Nier game, and that means there's going to be massive, major story spoilers every which way. I'm going to be spoiling absolutely everything that happens in the story. So if you haven't finished it, you should click away now. You have been warned. I am not going to be sugarcoating absolutely anything. We are going through the entire storyline. So if you haven't beaten it yet, you need to click away now. This is your first and only warning. Okay? I'm going to spoil everything now. The story opens up with a girl in a black dress waking up inside an area known as the Cage and being greeted by a cartoon ghost-like creature that calls herself Mama. Together, Mama and the girl very slowly start to make their way through the entirety of the cage, entering and repairing weapon memories from corruption brought on by these ominous dark enemies that don't really have a name. The girl in turn slowly begins to gain back lost memories and emotions of her own from exploring the weapon memories, and it slowly begins to build a strange picture indicating that there might be more to this girl than we already know. Further into the weapon memories also further opens up Mama, who seems to know an awful lot about the cage, and at some point even outright states that the reason the girl in black came to the cage is to move forward with her own grief. And the girl also run into a strange night-like monster that initially tries to attack them, but it stops just short, and instead of trying to answer any questions they have, it just immediately runs away, leaving the two completely confused and wondering if what they saw was even real. They run into this monster again numerous times throughout the cage, and it seems like the monster is trying to tell them something or might be looking for something that might be related to the girl, but it always just stops just short of it. Everything comes to a head in the final area of the cage, inscriptions in stone. Mama starts to speak much more cryptically, talking about how this area is the final leg of the girl's journey and that it's time to restore the final memory. When they encounter the first dark scarecrow of the area, the girl's memories are apparently engraved onto the scarecrow, and things get even weirder when the girl enters the memory, and instead of playing as the girl, you instead play as the monster that they encountered so many times before. It even physically appears in the memory with you and reveals what exactly the creature is. This creature is called a Dream Eater, and no, not that Dream Eater, this Dream Eater. Anyway, when the girl finally exits the memory and absorbs it, it somehow causes her immense physical pain, and Mama then starts guiding her into the deepest recesses of these memories and states that they're getting close to her original self. Starts getting weirdly philosophical as well, talking about two contradictory beings existing within the memories. A monster that wanted to become human, and a monster that completely rejected the idea of humanity altogether. Recovering the second set of memories, the girl damn near collapses in pain just from the stress of it. The screen gets all staticky and glitchy and she starts limping around everywhere. Additionally, Mama's more caring and jovial personality completely disappears. She's a lot more, I guess I want to say somber. She's more cryptic. She doesn't even seem to really care when a massive path completely breaks away. She's just like, all right, I guess the path is gone. Nowhere to go but forward. Third set of memories, Mama also starts talking about how the Dream Eaters want to consume dreams and to become human is just a base instinct that's really hard for the creature to ignore. It's almost kind of like giving us an insight into how the Dream Eater felt. And we also encounter another Dream Eater in those strange, dark, corruptive enemies that sort of talk about why the monster is suddenly feeling bad for eating someone's dreams and attaining a human form. Mama eventually guides the monster to this long field of mirrors, and she suddenly starts reminiscing about a human the monster met, and it's really sad for some reason, and she also suddenly starts talking about how the monster's restoration is nearly complete. Additionally, when the girl absorbs these memories, she literally comes so close to collapsing, as if carrying the weight of these memories is causing her deep physical pain. Mama and the girl in black eventually manage to locate the last set of memories and of course the last dark scarecrow, and from here the monster reappears in the field of mirrors with Mama by their side, and Mama suddenly starts talking about how they need to move forward and that the monster somehow needs to face their sins. The monster eventually locate a massive mirror at the end of the field, and of course I need to point out, this is your last warning for spoilers. Anyway, Mama and the monster eventually locate this massive mirror at the end of the mirror field, and instead of the monster's reflection, it's instead a reflection of a familiar girl in a white dress. And Mama reveals that the monster actually stole her body and devoured all of her dreams. And while the monster was actually trying to devour all of her dreams, she reveals that the girl and the monster in question were actually going to become best friends. Their relationship was growing and they were going to be good friends, but instead the monster became human and the girl in question actually became the monster that we encountered all throughout the story. She was the monster that the girl in black was always encountering and the monster that was running away from the girl in black. The monster essentially stole her entire identity. What? That monster that we encountered, yep, that's the girl in the white dress. It's actually a little girl that the monster stole her entire life from by devouring all of her dreams and essentially destroying whatever friendship they were going to have. All of this laid out to bear and all of the monster's sins revealed, Mama eventually poses a question that she's repeatedly asked the human monster. And after she exits, or should I say he/they exit the memory, Mama essentially forces the human monster to take on the final fragment. And once she does that, she suddenly becomes much more serious and starts flying around her and immediately asks, what does the human monster wish for? And in response to that, this massive stone astral clock comes out of nowhere and suddenly starts reassembling itself in this really meticulous way. The hour and minute hands suddenly reset to positions back to their starting position. The clock starts turning around, and at the end of it all, the monster human finally collapses and reveals their wish. The human monster only has one wish, and that wish is to make the girl in white human once more. From here, the story doesn't end. Instead, it jumps back to 4 months where we learn the origin of the monster and the girl in white. Here, we actually learn their names too. The monster's name is Lavania, and that the girl in white is suffering from strange nightmares, and that her name is Theo. We also get a bit of insight into how Lavania originally thought of the girl when they first met, and he comes off as kind of an asshole here, just kind of talking about how he'll make good use of her. From this point on, Lavania, Theo, and Mama's replacement Carrier all start to explore the cage on their own and start exploring new weapon memories, which are pretty dark on their own. They all have this theme of lacking freedom and not going against the grain. Instead, they're just expected to follow a very strict order of things. And this theme of no freedom actually bleeds into the theme of the battlefield as well. It's all these cold, sterile, white environments that they just feel so isolating. It really translates well to just every single facet of these new weapon memories. Additionally, as Lavania clears out the corruption in the memories, he actually starts to gain new sensations and emotions in the representation of Theo's dreams from Theo, obviously. Like, he gets a dream that represents something like anger, or something like sadness, or something like speech, or let's say something like the idea of getting revenge and hurting someone who hurt you. And he teaches Theo the concept of revenge. And this also slowly starts to build up the relationship between the two, because Lavania initially starts up as sort of kind of cold and standoffish, while Theo is this really charming, sweet, inquisitive girl who just kind of wants to know more about the world around her. And Lavania is kind of slowly, very slowly, reluctantly teaching her about himself and the world around her. This is further compounded by the fact that Theo actually wants to remain in the cage forever, or at least longer, with Lavania and Carrier, and unfortunately, Carrier tells her that she can't because she has to wake up at some point. And we all know what happened to Theo after Lavania ate all of her dreams, right? But after this, Lavania and Carrier finally move on to the next area of the cage. They go down that interesting stone elevator, and the game ends. Yeah, the game just kind of abruptly ends after this. Unfortunately, there's no other story content, but there is a fruit tree that grows after. Okay, yeah, I'm kind of not a big fan of how abruptly the story ends, since not all of the story content is currently out. And I really want to get back into the story immediately. I want to see the continuation of this story. I can't wait, man. That doesn't take away from how genuinely fun and engaging the game is, and that's mainly because of its story, which is probably the most engaging story I've ever played in a mobile game, barring those mobile ports of the Final Fantasy games that Square keeps bringing over, including the Pixel remasters. This is genuinely a fun and engaging experience. And the fact that it's a mobile game says a lot. So graphics and presentation of the game alone are just so fantastic, and thankfully, I have not been pushed to spend a single dime in the 2 days I binged the game's story. And I mean that honestly. All I did was spend gems, because you get a massively generous amount of gems from completing story missions and side quests and special event quests. It was honestly really shocking, because again, this is a free-to-play gacha mobile game, and gacha games are especially popular in Japan, where people go crazy for this type of mechanic and these type of games, which is honestly probably more so an answer to the state of the video game industry currently, but we're not going to get into that. While it is admittedly a little frustrating to have to sit around and wait for the drip feed of story content, because not everything was ready or released for the launch of the game on July 29th, I can honestly say that this is still a fantastic game and a very good Nier game. Do not sleep on this game. You will 100% regret it. And I know that some people will be nervous because it is a mobile game and you're obviously nervous about monetization, but I promise you, there is a genuinely good and engaging experience here. You need to pick this up. And I say that with genuine confidence. Do not sleep on this game. Do not miss out on it. And then, once you guys are done finishing all of the story quests and all of the event quests, you can hang out with me and wait for all of the story content to drop in a very, very slow drip feed. A story content drip feed that will be so very slow. Post-production update. Square has gone ahead and released a trailer for the next piece of story content. It's chapter 10 and it's called Flickering Lights. The game has also been out for a week now and people are playing through the story and making reactions and videos on it. The 10th chapter also has a release date. It comes out August 10th. So I'm going to be recording footage for it and uploading my live reaction to YouTube. So look forward to that. Yeah. Bye.